Díomh Cordia is Mr. James Kelly. I briam leis an fan dúireacht Ulscoil Éireann Canada agus bhfuil an fáilte chur roimh inniu go dtí an panel seo. Hello everyone, my name is James Kelly. I am the CEO of the Ireland Canada University Foundation. It's my great pleasure to welcome you all to this panel discussion on language. I should begin maybe by just saying that Landspeak, this event, is presented by the Ireland Canada University Foundation, or ICUF, in partnership with the Centre for Creative Writing and Oral Studies in the University of Manitoba, the Centre for Canadian Studies in University College Dublin, and the Craig Dobbin Visiting Professor in University College Dublin. We're delighted to be offering Landspeak events for free, and if anyone would like to assist with supporting the costs, there are links to be found around the Hop-In website. Okay, I'm very excited to be moderating this discussion today. It's on a subject very close to my heart, and we have some really great speakers here. We're looking at ways in which we can support languages, the languages that we love, minority languages in a world where English is so widely spoken. And we have three panelists. I'm going to introduce them to you one by one. Are we on screen? Great, yeah. So we have Nicola Campbell. Nicola Campbell is she lives on the west coast of Turtle Island, Canada, and she writes books. She's published five books for children in Indigenous language, and is an award-winning writer. And we have Linda Irvine, who is joining us from Belfast. Linda is a language rights activist, and she is the manager of Tourist Irish Language Programme on the Newtownards Road, which is a really inspirational project teaching the Irish language to the community there. And she's also president of the newly formed East Belfast GAA Club. And we have Una Kavanagh, who's founder and editor of weareirish.ie. She's a travel writer, author of Unshaw, a gamer, and a multimedia content producer. So I'm going to ask each of you, and we'll start with you, Nicola, just if you could tell me a little bit about the context in which you're working with language and a little bit about the work that you do.
Ja, Kuntlo, and Nicola Campbell, and Jawat and Tlakabmuch and Silch on my mother's side and Métis on my father's side. Thank you for having me. I'm grateful to participate. I'm currently located in Coast Salish territory, Stalosal Timuk. I'm a writer. I have children's books. My first book was titled Shishiatko, published in, I lost track of the years, 2005. I have Shinji's Canoe, A Day with Yaya, Grandpa's Girls, and my most recent is Stand Like a Cedar. And with each one, I guess it's, well, the first two were talking about Indian residential school survivors experience. I guess the first one is before going to Indian residential school, and the second one is at residential school, and kind of as somebody who grew up not speaking the language, but hearing it all my life, and as a child growing up with questions, it reflects on who we were before Indian residential school. I tried with each book to incorporate language. It was, with each one I was mentioning earlier, it progressively, I use a little bit more language. with the last one, it has 2 glossaries, one in Intlagabmachgin and one in Halkamelam. The illustrator is Kosalish, and I also, in my dissertation and in my writing, I've been really writing a lot about the land and writing about our process of harvesting and gathering traditional foods. And I tend to go back and forth between languages with the words that I know. And I have, mainly what I have is a series of memorized words because my elders were all, they had already gone through residential school. So I was raised in a weaving of words, and everything that I have is just in my memories. So I hope that answers your question.
Absolutely, that's fantastic. Thank you, Nicola. Could I ask you, Linda, to share a little bit about the context in which you're working and the work that you do?
Certainly. So I am based in what is a loyalist area, so sort of Protestant Unionist working class area in East Belfast. It's an interface area. It's a place that's seen a lot of violence over the years and a lot of problems. And it's also a place where people would not all people, but many of them don't regard themselves as being Irish, which probably seems very strange to people outside Ireland. And they reject Irish language, Irish culture, anything like that. So when I fell in love with the language, I was just introduced to it and didn't have any of the language myself because it's not taught in state schools. And if you're Protestant, you wouldn't get the opportunity to ever learn Irish. But because I just really engaged with it, I wanted to give other people within my own community the opportunity to also learn Irish. And that has proved to be very popular. There are many people who, like myself, feel that this is something they missed out on. But there's also many other people who are, I suppose, hostile to what we do. And, we've had threats and things like that. But the reality is that, there are so many people who are supportive of us. We have grown from what was a very tiny first class to now being one of the largest Irish language providers in Belfast. And as well as introducing people to the language, we are introducing people to the Gaelic culture that is just part and parcel of their own area, their own history and their own heritage. And it comes as a real shock to people. We have plans towards the end of the year. We're going to open the first ever integrated Irish medium nursery school in East Belfast. So integrated means there'll be Catholic and Protestant children learning together, being playing through the medium of Irish. So we're really, really excited about that. It's a big work, and we know it will face some hostility as well.
Thank you. Thank you, Linda. Sorry, we will come back to both you, Linda and Nicola. Could I ask you now, Una Ming, maybe just to give a little bit of background to you and the work that you're doing, please. Sorry, background noise here.
No worries at all. Absolutely. I suppose in terms of my story, I was adopted from Vietnam as a baby. I've been here since I was six weeks old. So I'm 30 this year. So I've been here quite a long time. And I suppose I was adopted into a family where my grandfather was a native Irish speaker. So he was from a Gaeltacht, an Irish speaking area in Ireland, in West Kerry. He was from Ballingaul. Which is an absolutely gorgeous part of the world. And so because it was myself, my mom and my granddad at home, my mother was a primary school teacher, but there was Irish always in her household. And I suppose I was very lucky that I was brought into an Irish speaking household because it was something that was very important in our lives because it was our connection to each other and also our connection with our family. that happened to be in the Gaeltacht still are. And so I always had from there an interest in the language. I attended a Gaelscoil, which is an all Irish speaking school, a primary school. And then in secondary school, I also really only had, to be honest, I had more of an interest in Irish than any other subject. And then I decided from there to go on to study for a BA in Irish journalism, which was basically journalism through the Irish language. And since then, it's been, funny enough, there was a period of time where I went into English speaking media first, and I don't really know why. Perhaps it was a confidence thing, or maybe I just didn't want to just strictly do Irish language stuff at the time. But a few years ago, I decided to reshape everything that I knew and know, and decided to go headfirst into the Irish language community. Since I had I suppose, a strong background in it, and since then I've been running a lot of Irish speaking communities. Online, and also been using my social media and my content creation as a way to promote the Irish language in a more modern way. And also I do things, as you've mentioned there, I stream in the Irish language, and so I live stream 3 times a week in the Irish language and English. So it's just a way to kind of bring it into my everyday life without it feeling forced, because for me, I use Irish every single day. It comes naturally to me, and I'm just showing that there is a life beyond school. So that's kind of what I'm up to these days mostly.
Gramágat and Ming. So I think what's interesting is that well, there's lots of interesting things to look at, but Nicola and Linda, I think what you share is that, and I do as well, is that I'm sorry, I've got an 11-year-old boy who's getting a bit stir crazy, but I think he's calming down now. What we share is that the language hasn't come to us through childhood like it has for you, Una Ming. So there was talk yesterday, if anyone saw the lacrosse panel, where Bruce Roundpoint said no one ever taught him how to play lacrosse. The stick was just put in his hand, and it's like no one teaches you to walk. It's just who you are from the beginning. But with languages, minority languages, minority languages struggle to, and it's a challenge for language to bring in new speakers. And I think Nicola and Linda, the work that you do is really looking to support new speakers coming in. Would you say, maybe ask you, Linda, what it is like to come to a language that you didn't have from childhood? Like, how do you feel you relate to the language in that sense?
Well, there's a number of things I could say about that. First of all, I suppose whenever I started learning Irish, the first thing I discovered was that I'm not a natural language learner. I don't have any natural ability in language. I didn't even learn a language in school. So I didn't have the tools of how do you actually go about learning a language. Now, I enjoyed the learning, but I found it very frustrating. And also when I compared myself to other people, and I felt that nobody else was a learner except me, because I didn't have a word of it, and every sound was alien. But I just chipped away. But for my own work with people, who the majority of them have never heard a word of Irish before they start learning with us, I think that's been a good thing that it doesn't come to me easily, because I'm able to encourage them and say to them, look, if I can do it, you can do it. So, I'm now been learning, it's 10 years now, but I'm in my second year at university doing a degree in Irish. I still struggle a lot, but it's an awful lot better than it was at the start. But also for me, there was the added kind of, and it's really hard to explain for people outside Northern Ireland because of the politics and the situation here. There was a feeling within me, because I come from the Protestant community, was I doing something wrong by learning Irish? What would that mean to other people in my community? My husband was a bit he was very supportive, but he was also worried about me when it was kind of publicly known. And again, I know that's very hard to get across to people in other countries, why some people see the language as such a threat. And, even for myself, when I learnt more about the language and about the fact that it was in our place names and all around us, because I was born in Belfast, I was brought up in Belfast, I've spent my whole life there. I didn't know that its original name was Belfarstia, the mouth of the sandbank ford, which of course is Irish. And imagine, being deprived of such basic knowledge about your own place. And that's the kind of thing that I wanted to share with other people. And I wanted to say, look, this is not about politics. This is not about, communities. This is about something that's always been around you, that's always been a part of who you are, that you've just never known. And the lovely thing is that there's so many people that are on that journey of discovery along with me. I always say I started out, Tourist is the project that I manage. And tourist means journey. So I started out on this journey on my own, and now there's hundreds of us. So that's a lovely place to be.
Thank you, Linda. And could I ask, Nicola, have you found difficulty, as Linda has spoken about, in terms of people questioning what it is that you're doing? Have you encountered any kind of challenges? And then the other thing is, as Linda spoke about, maybe the excitement that people find when they do have this engagement that they haven't had before with the language. So first of all, sorry, maybe any challenges that you've had. You're muted.
Once I moved away from my home community and went to university, the language completely changed because at UBC the focus was on Musqueam, which is a Coast Salish language in the Musqueam that the people of the Musqueam community speak in Musqueam territory. So Coast Salish, there's actually a few dialects in the Vancouver and Lower Mainland of Halkamalum, Hunkaminam speakers. Vancouver Island on the southern tip is Halkaminam. But so I guess as a challenge, it would have been a reliance on the dictionary for words or phoning home. I still have to phone home. I still have to talk to my elders all the time. I actually just posted a rant on our nation's Facebook page because we have this wonderful, this dictionary, the Thompson River Salish dictionary, the Untitled, and the people who made it was Lawrence and Terry Thompson, and they kept a copyright of it in their own name, and I found that quite disturbing through the years. The dictionary is no longer in print. People have actually photocopied it in order to get copies of it, and the printers are not going to do any more copies, which is incredibly disappointing with the Untitled language. That at the age that they were, when they realized how wrong it was for them to keep copyright of it, that they didn't transfer it back to our nation. It just doesn't make any sense at all to me. Because I grew up with elders who spoke Ntlagatmachjin and Silchjin, there was a differentiation too between languages. I just don't know sometimes. I know now what language I'm thinking in. Like if it's Silch, I'm thinking, okay, I'm pretty sure that's Silch, but otherwise it's Ntlagatmachjin. And then just not having people to talk to. Like my main teacher was my grand auntie, and well, with the pandemic now, she's in a home. She's 95 now, so we can't even go visit her. Yeah, it's different, because I think in the funding gets channeled mainly to French, to the French language, and Indigenous languages aren't receiving the amount of money they should in order to have more programming, in order to have things like daycares. Instead, there's classes that are offered here and there in the specific territory, and also because in British Columbia there are so many languages and so many dialects, so it can vary. So,
could I ask? Just, so what your work does, though, is it probably, I imagine your work is connecting children with a language that they may not have had a previous connection with. So it's their kind of ancestral language. Would that be correct?
For in my own valley, in the Nicola Valley, and those from the Fraser Canyon, yeah, I think so. And also, I think by having 2 glossaries in this last book, it has, it's reminding people, like, as Salish, Co-Salish, Interior Salish speakers, that the connections that we have dialectually with the root words and that sort of thing.
Yeah. Okay.
Sorry, I lost my train of thought.
That's fine. What? Can you hear me? You can hear me. Yeah. Maybe I'd just like to bring in the other speakers and just ask, just looking, there's clearly challenges protecting languages and supporting languages when English is so prevalent. But could I ask if you see, like, over the last recent years, or looking to the future, any kind of causes for hope around the future of the language?
It's you, Ming, want to take? Do you want me to answer that, or?
I guess I'm easy either way, but for me, I suppose I see a resurgence of it of sorts, particularly on social media. And I suppose, just to mention, going back to the challenges just briefly, is that one of the biggest things for Irish is, I think, that there's an over-reliance by our government on people like me and other types of people to be the ones to push the language forward and to bring it to the forefront. And there's also a lot of pressure that then we in turn get as fluent Irish speakers to be de facto translators or de facto teachers, whereas that's not really what we want to do at all. We're just trying to use it as a living language. So often there's a case where, I'll be asked to translate something, or I'll be asked to, what's the Irish for this, whatever. And there's kind of, for some reason, I think there's a ironically, even though Irish is in the educational system, there is a lack of education on simply, for example, how to use dictionaries, because there are plenty of Irish dictionaries online, but instead people revert to asking Gaelgori Irish speakers about this, which in turn, it's not really your job to do so. And I would hope that we would move beyond that. I think that the hope is that we are moving beyond that, and people are learning to appreciate that speakers are just like speakers, as if they were speaking English, that we just choose to utilize our language in a different fashion. I think that the important thing is that we keep on fostering respect for the language, particularly, of course, for the many speakers in the Gaeltacht, as I mentioned, which is the Irish language speaking areas. For those people, there's been a lot of cases recently where they cannot access services in the Irish language, which really doesn't make sense, considering that yes, it's a minority language, of course, in Ireland, but it is still one of our national languages. We have English and Irish. So it's kind of, it's poor. It's a poor performance to not be able to access key governmental services or civil services in the Irish language, particularly for those in the Gaeltacht who would rather conduct their businesses through Irish. So I can see things moving in the right direction in terms of minority language, but in Irish in particular, but I don't like seeing it as a tokenism, and I see that happen a lot. We've had a wonderful past 2 weeks here in Ireland with Seacht na Gaeilge, which takes place actually over 2 weeks. The title means Week of Irish, but actually takes over 2 weeks, and it's a wonderful initiative that happens every single year. But the problem is that we have such a big surge in the media to do with Irish and the Irish language, and it's all over the place during those 2 weeks, and then it starts to peter off. And it's a shame that things are often just confined to those 2 weeks, whereas it should be, it should be happening throughout the year. And initiatives like that are really good, but I feel like those in power feel that that's enough. And it isn't enough, because often it's other organizations or other people who have to organize these events on their own, as opposed to often the tokenism that we see by politicians or by media or whatever. So it's kind of, yeah, there is definitely hope for the future. And I think that I do see in my communities that I run that there is hope. But at the same time, I think that there is possibly an over-reliance on more vocal Gaeilgeoirí to be the vocal ones to push it, rather than what should be, I suppose, governmental pressure. I hope that wasn't too waffly.
No. That's very interesting. I think it seems to me that I sense what's happening in Ireland, from my perspective, looking at the language, is that over the last couple of decades, there's a changing attitude towards the language, and I think the attitude has become much more positive. In the Republic, anyway. It's a more complex picture up in Belfast. But I think, Linda, the work that you're doing, I must say I was very, very, very impressed when I visited Turas a couple of times in recent years. Just how the work you're doing is healing. It's a kind of a healing process. To me, it looks like it's part of a reconciliation of sorts in the north. And could you speak a little bit about that, about the two communities, and maybe changing attitudes to the language, and how that might, I think, point to a brighter future?
Yes, very much. Well, as I say, language in Northern Ireland is one of those contested things, unfortunately, and so people get very hot up about language, in favour and against. The work that we have been doing is, and this was very important to me when we opened Turas and we got involved in the whole Irish language thing. I didn't want to do, we're taking it back sort of a thing, which I think there was some people would have kind of liked that idea, and we would have been the Protestant version of the Irish language and everything. Everybody in West Belfast said the opposite. And that was not where we were coming from. We wanted to take our place within the Irish language community. What we have found is, just friendships, relationships, so many have been formed. So many of the Irish language groups and organisations have helped us, advised us, and, as I say, befriended us. We have always, from the word go, encouraged our learners not just to attend classes with us, but to go over the other parts of Belfast and further afield to attend events and other classes. And as well as telling our learners about such events, we physically take them over, we organise events. So that has been very healing. And then, when they go to things, they encourage people to come over and visit us in East Belfast. So it's just been a very natural, I suppose, cross-city engagement, which has been lovely. We also, just 2 years ago, we haven't got great use out of it at the minute because of the pandemic, but better times will come. We managed to get funding to create a Lowerland, a library area. And it started because we bought a couple of books, and then we bought a second-hand bookshelf, and then we bought a few more books, and some people donated books, and then we got another second-hand bookshelf, and we just people used to borrow the books. Quite often they didn't bring them back, but it was better people having the use of them than on a shelf. So when we got this bit of money, bit of government money, we decided we would create our own Loreland and study space, because now there are a number of our students who started at sort of Bunrang beginners level who are now at university or doing A level, advanced level, or GCSE in Northern Ireland. So they're really taking their studies seriously. So, as I say, now we have this wonderful area, but for us what's important is it's not just for our learners, it's for anybody in Belfast who wants to come over and borrow books. So we see this as another great way of creating relationships. And I always say, the work that I do in Belfast, it's not cross-community work. But cross-community work is a natural byproduct of what we do. We offer Irish language. We love the Irish language, but it's open to anybody. And, the majority of our learners do come from the Unionist community, but many of them also come from the Catholic community. So it's just a very natural way to create friendships. And as Una knows, when people love the language, they encourage each other, they help each other. And, they're passing on tips, get this book, go to that course, here's a great teacher, here's great words. So, for me, it's just the love of the language draws people together, forms friendships. In times, at the moment we're all online, but in normal times I sit in my office and the classes are going on all around me, and I always say, I hear people, they're sitting down together, they're learning together, and they're laughing together, and that's just such an amazing thing. And it is about healing. It is, and as I said, tourist meets journey, and we're on a journey, but it's not just a journey in the language. It's turned out to be a journey of healing and a journey of reconciliation. And my goodness, but Northern Ireland needs more of that, I think.
Absolutely. I could say, actually, if people would like to post questions, please do, and we will have some time at the end to take questions. I just want to kind of explain like a little bit about my experience of tourists. I came up and visited you a couple of times over the years and met some of the learners. And for people who don't know Belfast, there's a very sad history and a history of division. And I was just so impressed meeting some of the learners. I remember a woman who came from the Falls, which is a nationalist part of the city. And she said that she'd grown up in the Falls all her life, and there was always offer of Irish classes. She had no interest because she saw that as being kind of insular, like that was her kind of community, and she wanted to get out of her community. And it was only when she saw your classes that in a part of the city that she wouldn't have been comfortable visiting maybe 15 years ago, maybe mightn't have been that felt safe anyway, but she became one of your regular students. I'm sure there are many stories like that. And conversely as well, one of your students I spoke to, who grew up in the Shankill, which is a loyalist part of Belfast, and he was just so excited to be going to the Falls to join the conversation. He felt like after growing up in the city for decades, he would have been like very frightened to go to the Falls. But here was this kind of language connection that was giving a route to connect. Because the politics of the north of Ireland is always changing, but the language is this ancient connection, so I think the work that you're doing around the language there is really important and special. So I'd like to thank you for that. I'm going to ask Nicola, maybe just how you feel about perceptions, and we'll come back to Una about changing perceptions around the language, but do you feel there are changing perceptions to Indigenous languages in recent years, or among the general kind of population? Sorry, that was to Nicola.
Wrong camera. Yeah, that was to Nicola. Sorry, yes.
Okay. I'm an author, and I'm not a language teacher. I have good friends who are, but from what I've observed going into this classrooms and in public schools, because I visit a lot of different public schools, is that in the school districts and the universities, they're trying to engage in topics of reconciliation and changing attitudes around education and education about the impacts of Indian residential schools in Canada and how it has impacted our languages and our cultures as well. But the fact that a lot of teachers in the classroom are making efforts towards learning the languages, learning about the languages. I've had police officers also ask about proper pronunciation and language differentiation from, say, the Okanagan, which is Syilx-speaking people, to the Nicola Valley, which is Tla'agamach people, to here, which is Stalo Coasalish, so Halkomelem speaking people, and then into Vancouver, which is, there's Skohotmish to Tsleil-Waututh and Chumathquiam speaking people. So there's an awareness and in knowing whose territory you're in and which language the people are speaking in that territory. There's an awareness in the schools as far as pronunciation, efforts to learn greetings and that sort of thing. There's still too much money going towards the French language and not enough going towards Indigenous languages. And I think that's something that's going to have to change here in Canada. It's still a colonial, genocidal thing that has been maintained for way too long. And we need recognition, and we need to channel those funds towards our own languages and our own educators.
And yeah, that's very interesting. You're echoing a point that Una Ming made as well about government support being critical. And in terms of children and schooling, is it possible for children? So in Ireland, there's a kind of growing movement. Well, there's been for decades, but it's gathering momentum now, where children can go to school through the Irish language. Is that something you would experience?
Oh yeah, it's definitely happening here. Like my daughter's learning Halkomelem here, and through me, she's learning in Tla'agamach. So she's always coming home with new words, and her favorite person is the language teacher at her school. So, yeah.
Great. I mean, could I ask you about that? To come back to that question about changing. I think for a language to survive, it has to be used and it has to be loved. And it seems to me that there is, at a certain level in Ireland, there's a growing love, and in younger generations as well. What would you think of that?
Yeah, like for me, I always get excited with whatever language, because language is one of those things that is, first off, it's free. You can be used by anyone, and anyone can learn it at any time, So it's one of those things that it's not, there are, of course, sometimes some barriers to do with how accessible learning materials are, but ultimately the language is yours, whatever it is. And I think if people can get beyond connecting it with just simply a school subject or that kind of aspect, that they'll be flying. Because I know for me, obviously I had a very different experience because I was brought up with the language. And I know that people often get, I suppose, nervous when it comes to vocalizing their Irish for fear of being mocked or anything. But realistically, people aren't going to do that because they want to encourage people. And Linda touched on this earlier. I get excited when people can speak Irish with me because then I don't have to use English. So it's kind of one of those things that I would rather conduct all my business through Irish, because I feel that it was such a precious language that was we were stripped of it because of colonialism. And it's kind of one of those things where it has such meaning and identity and heritage attached to it that, it's no wonder that there's so many Irish Irish people, the Irish diaspora abroad, it's no wonder that they want to connect to their country through the language and whatever. And I think that younger people are starting to see that. I know, like I'm a content creator on TikTok, and the Irish language is my niche over there. And anytime I push it there, like I get loads of young people who are commenting on it, utilizing what they have and whatever. And it really is one of those things is you just want to use it naturally. You want to use it as if you were using English in any capacity. And with that, through movements, through incorporating it into, like I said, I play video games, like there are some Irish language video games out there, through seeing it in books. You know, Game of Thrones has been translated to Irish. Harry Potter is available in Irish. SpongeBob the movie is available in Irish, you know, and we're seeing more and more. And SpongeBob, by the way, is on Netflix now, so in the Irish language, which is pretty incredible. So we are definitely moving in the right way forward to promote the language and to push it beyond a minority language, hopefully. And it's one of those things that I'm really excited to see, because I think there's a lot of hope for the future. And of course, it's not going to be the same as the Irish language that we had over 100 years ago or whatever. And that's okay. We're going to develop in a different capacity. But I think that as long as we have the respect there for the authentic things like authentic pronunciation, grammar is important, of course, and all those different aspects to do with language, that we're in a very good position. And I see enough people online in particular, and who are marching the streets when we're able to march in the streets, not now, obviously, but I can see the passion there. And that's the kind of stuff that excites me. I'm very much a person, you know, I could complain about someone not doing this, but for me, if I can fix that, what can I do to fix that? And I think that if we can approach minority languages in that respect, you know, what can I do to combat these issues that I'm feeling, then I think that we would be in such a fantastic position to keep striving forward.
Absolutely. And you talk about technology, and I think there's a whole other panel around technology and the future of language. But I was very impressed. I'll just briefly talk about the pop-up Gaeltacht, which is this phenomenon that started a few years ago. And, you know, I think the challenge for a minority language is to find other speakers. You know, the easiest thing to do is for everybody to slip into English. And you just assume everyone else you could be in the same room as another Irish speaker, but you don't know, because everyone just defaults into English. But the pop-up Gaeltacht is a development a couple of years ago, and it was organized by people. You know about the Zooming, obviously, and Linda, I'm sure, as well. It's organized by people on Twitter and on Facebook, and it's basically like a flash mob, but instead of showing up and doing a dance, it's a decision. The word goes out, we're going to meet at this bar, and this, if you want to speak Irish Friday, this is where we're going to be. And so you have a phenomenon where 200 people would show up in a bar in Dublin or in Belfast, or they have them in like New York, Hong Kong, and it's just an opportunity for people to use the language. And I think that's critical for a minority language surviving in an English language world, is to find spaces where people can actually use whatever Irish they have come together. I think we have a question for Nicola come in on the chat. I can't see it there. Is it possible to bring that up on the screen? Oh yeah. Nicola, is there any actions or activism to lobby the government to increase funding to Indigenous language teaching that we might contribute to? Did you hear that question?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not entirely certain. I know we've talked about it, but I'm not sure what is actually happening. It's always part of the conversation.
Yeah, I expect a challenge might be that there are so many different languages. Like maybe you might just speak a little bit about your experience of the different languages that you connect into and work through.
Here in Chilliwack and in the Nicola Valley, that's Helcamalum, and in Stalo territory, and in the Nicola Valley, it's Ntagapmachjeen and Silch. It just seems funding is always an issue. There's a lot of things that are happening, and they're working towards different things, but that's the main issue that I know
of. But yeah, so the languages. So here in Ireland, we're talking about maybe it's more simple. There's one language to rally around, and then there are dialects.
There's 233 in Canada, and in BC. I should know how many there are in BC. I've researched it. Oh no, okay, 203 Indigenous communities in British Columbia, 34 language groups in British Columbia. So, which is a lot. You go over a mountain range and it's another language. The thing with Salish, Coast Salish, Interior Salish, is there's the root words, there are similarities, but there are tremendous differentiations as well. So there, in the past, there were elders who spoke as many as 5 or 6 languages and distinct dialectual differences. But yeah, there's a lot of languages.
We have another question for you, Nicola. Should come on screen. Thank you. Nicola's books are beautifully illustrated. Could you ask her about putting the language and the visuals together?
Like the way it is, or are they asking with?
Yeah. So how do you approach?
It would have been wonderful. Like when it would have been wonderful to translate the entire text. Every time I look, like with Stand Like a Cedar, I've thought, why didn't I just translate that whole line? Finding somebody to, my cat is in here and she's playing. I don't know if you can hear that. Anyways, to translate, finding translators to work with to translate entire lines was a little bit challenging. For me, a part of it is funding and just finding somebody who is responsive. People are busy and they just don't respond, that sort of thing. That's been challenging. Apparently all of our language classes in the Nicola Valley are online now, and so, which is great for me because I have been away from home for quite a while. So what I've retained is, it's still there, but it's slipping away. So being able to take some language classes on Zoom will be beneficial for sure. I think the other thing is that I've found a little bit disconcerting is I really prefer the IPA, the International Phonetic Alphabet, and I tend to use that in my books. That's what the dictionary uses. I appreciate the fact that each character represents specific sounds, because there are some really challenging sounds for certain speakers. Because I grew up hearing them, I tend to be able to enunciate quite well. I'm not going to say exactly, but in the Canyon region, there are people who tend to not use the IPA, and they tend to just use a system of sounding out the words, and that is very confusing, I find, because you just don't know really what exactly the word is once you enunciate it, but with the characters you know exactly what the sound is. So I mean, it's pretty hard to get the exact intonation of each word, and in the context of the flow and the rhythm of the languages, but it really makes a difference, I find. So
yeah. Could I just, you mentioned online classes, and I think, again, coming back to technology, and I'm kind of, in the work of our foundation as well, we kind of look, what can we do to support languages, to support our language into the future? And I think online offers great opportunities. I mean, on one hand, we're all tired of being on Zoom, but on the other hand, it is offering great opportunities to connect, such as this, and around language. And I wonder, Linda, and maybe I'll ask Linda, and then we'll just maybe we'll kind of wrap it up with to ask everyone in general last thoughts. But Linda, do you find with Thuras, is online something that opening up new opportunities, or do you see any kind of opportunities around technology in general over the coming years?
Yeah, no, it's been really interesting because obviously when the pandemic came, our teachers had to then immediately learn new skills and move everything online. And there's still a lot of the learners, they really miss the social, the interaction. But it has worked really well. We have a few American people now who've joined us, and there's no sort of boundary, there's no barriers. It's also very convenient. We've one of our learners, he's been furloughed, and he's one of our scholarship people. That was probably something that I should have mentioned. We have a number of people at university, and we raised money and we financially support them to go to university. So he's one of our scholarship students. So he's doing about 5 or 6 classes a week now because he's furloughed. He's working he's not working, and he has time and the convenience where you can sit in front of a screen. And I've even found for my own study, though I miss the interaction in the university, I can do a lot more study now because I don't have to put up any traveling time. So it's really, really useful that way. We also started a buddy system, and for 2 purposes: to help people with their language, but also to kind of the socialization, during this kind of difficult time. So they buddy up and they meet together online and have, Cora, and sort of encourage each other and work through little pieces of work and whatnot. So that has been extremely beneficial to everybody. But we also, and we haven't had the chance to use it because we're only taking delivery of this piece of equipment whenever the second lockdown started. But we got funded by a local funder to buy equipment that allows you to live stream classes. So even when we go back to normal, and we don't know when that will be, but we think we would like to keep an online presence because it works. And as I say, it allows a lot more people to tune in and to keep up their language learning. So yeah, no, I think it has brought a lot of advantages. You also have a captive audience, and maybe that's a good thing sometimes. People know where else to go.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I think it's finding opportunities and spaces to make connection. That seems to me to be the essential aspect of supporting minority language. I wonder, are there any other last thoughts, Nicola, Una Ming, you'd like to share before we wrap up?
I think that what Linda said is fantastic there, because she's absolutely right. I mean, for me, my career is online anyway, but I've been able to do events that I might not normally get to do. I've done events for the US Embassy and stuff like that. So under normal circumstances, this probably would require me to go abroad or whatever. But because of who'd have thought that we'd be slightly praising the pandemic, but because of that we're all confined at home, I have so many wonderful opportunities. And not only that, as Linda was saying, not everyone from abroad can attend these events now. It's not restricted. And I think the word accessibility comes into play here, where we can utilize new technologies to experience new things. Now, I will admit that I am craving some in-person time at this stage, and particularly when it comes to courses. Like, there are a few courses in the Gaeltacht that I'd love to do this year, and at the moment they're being advertised online, but realistically I would prefer to go there. So I definitely would miss that aspect. But at the same time, when it comes to talks and panels and presentations, the online world is really, really useful, and it gives us the opportunities to really experience things that we might not necessarily do. I mean, for me, I work from home. I'm able to go to work in my pajamas if I feel like it. You can see I'm even in my room here. So there's definitely, pros and cons to the whole thing, but overall, thankfully, I think particularly to do with the Irish language and minority language, it's allowed us at least to bring it to a more global scale. And for me, that's a good thing.
For me, Margaret. Nicola, would you have any last thoughts to share on the panel?
Thank you for having me. I appreciate the time, and it's been very interesting. I've learned a lot. Thank you.
Oh, very welcome. Thank you. I'd just like to tell everyone watching that on the Landspeak website, which is Landspeak.ie, that we do have links to for all of our speakers, where you can see links to their websites and their work and Twitter. So Linda, Nicola, Unaming, Mila Magoiv, Osvan Shaw, and you. Thank you very much for being here with us. We're wrapping up now. I think there's another event in about 20 minutes. I'm going to make a suggestion for those of you who are going to stay on for 20 minutes. Why not try and hit that networking button? It's a kind of like it's a spin the wheel where you press the button, you don't know who you're going to talk to, but it's the kind of thing that would happen if we were in a conference. You go out of a room and you see somebody there beside the coffee. You just have a random conversation. So why not give it a whirl, see who you talk to, and thank you all for watching, and we'll see you shortly at 8 o'clock. Slán.